Okay, are we good to go here, Brody?
Yes, sir. You got 29 people in. Probably keep trickling in as they come, but feel free to kick it off whenever you feel like.
Right. Well, wonderful. Welcome everyone to NAMA's webinar today. We'll get things started here real quick since we do have a fairly long slideshow to jump through and anxious to share a paint care overview and talk about some of our expanded paint reuse efforts here in the country. So we'll get started here. We'll give folks another few minutes, maybe a minute to jump on, and then we'll get into the presentation. So. I'll begin by saying thank you to everyone for joining today's webinar. My name is Dan King. I'm charged with supporting national operations across all paint care states. This includes working closely with our service provider partners, state staff, and other stakeholders. This work also includes a focus on projects and community engagement. And one such effort in that area is expanded reuse, which I'll be touching on today. I'd also like to take a moment as people continue to chime in and get into the webinar to thank NAMA for giving PaintCare this opportunity to share this important information. As a longtime NAMA member, trainer, and board member, I can wholeheartedly say that NAMA is a wonderful organization doing great work. So thank you again there, and we will get started. So again, welcome to today's presentation. I'll be giving a PaintCare overview and touching on a number of components about paint care and how that's implemented across the country. And then I'll also jump into some of our expanded paint reuse efforts that we've been working on here over the last couple of years, and anxious to share that. And we'll save our questions until the very end, and or you can put those into the chat and I can address those at the end of the presentation. So thank you so much for joining us, and let's dive into this. So a paint care overview, and I assume that many of our household hazardous waste folks and colleagues across the country have a basic working understanding of paint care and the work that we do. But for those that do not, we'll use this overview to paint you a picture, if you will. So paint care, we're out there making paint recycling easy across all of the states that we work in. Paint care is a nonprofit organization created by the paint manufacturers. Paint care was set up basically to use drop-off locations to gather leftover paint. We arrange for the recycling and proper disposal of paint. And then along with that, we conduct public education in support of the program. We're also increasingly working to expand paint reuse opportunities since we believe in the waste management hierarchy and the highest best use of the materials that we manage. So why paint care? Paint care basically is there to address the issue of leftover paint. Studies have shown that approximately 10% of paint purchased is unused, which equals approximately 750 million gallons of leftover paint in the US each year. The cost and burden of managing paint falls squarely on municipal governments. Having been in the public sector for 15 years, I can say that that is an issue. Government resources are obviously limited and resulting in minimal opportunity to recycle or properly dispose of leftover paint in most states. A little bit about the origins and background. We're a part of the American Coatings Association. Paint Care would not exist without this important association. Organized in 1888, it's one of the oldest trade associations in DC. They represent manufacturers, distributors, raw material suppliers to the industry, and individuals working in the industry. It's a voluntary nonprofit association with an IRS designation as a 501c6. It serves as an advocate and compliance assistant resource and community liaison across the country. And ACA specifically represents about 95% of the US paint manufacturers. Now for Paint Care, being a subsidiary of ACA, we were really created by ACA to implement paint management programs in the states that passed paint stewardship laws. Established in 2009, when the first paint stewardship law passed in Oregon. We represent all architectural paint manufacturers, and we're governed by a board of architectural paint manufacturers. We have an IRS designation as a 501c3. The paint program was modeled after Product Care, the paint stewardship program in Canada, which began more than 20 years ago. As far as paint stewardship in the US, this is a great graphic here that just shows not only the progression that's happened since 2010 when Oregon came on, but it also shows the excitement that we're all rallying around, and that's the adding of Illinois, which will launch in 2025. You can see the other states here. We have fairly good spread across the country, and eventually we'd like to see the entire country covered with the paint stewardship program. Paint stewardship legislation, this is a key driver and provides a roadmap to develop, fund, and operate comprehensive paint management programs. Furthermore, the legislation drives manufacturers selling paint in the state to support a paint management program for leftover architectural coatings. The program must reduce, legislation drives the program to reducing the generation of post-consumer paint, promoting reuse, and providing a system for recycling and proper disposal, which aligns with the waste management hierarchy. PaintCare program goals. At the heart of it, we want to increase the convenience and recycling opportunities for leftover paint by offering a convenient statewide collection infrastructure. This helps to reduce the cost to state and local governments while managing paint in an environmentally responsible manner. Again, we adhere to the state waste management hierarchy, and in addition to the program and collecting paint and managing paint, in the most environmentally sound way, we also conduct education and outreach and try to stress to those that are touched by the program to reduce, reuse, recycle, buy right, use it up, and recycle the rest. PaintCare, another important piece here is that it establishes a sustainable funding mechanism through the paint stewardship assessment fee. PaintCare funding, just to dive a little bit deeper into that. I think this is an important slide here, and just kind of showing how PaintCare is funded. Again, PaintCare being that paint stewardship organization, we sit there at the top, but the way the organization is structured, we're funded through a fee on new paint sales. So manufacturers add the PaintCare fee to containers of architectural paint sold to their dealers, specifically to the distributors and retailers. And the retailers and distributors pass on the PaintCare fee to their customers by including it in that final sale price. Paint manufacturers report sales and submit fees to PaintCare on a monthly basis. Here's just a nice graphic that shows the spectrum of fee schedules and the range that we see from state to state. Fees differ by state and by container size, and range from 30 cents to $1.99 per gallon. The program is funded by paint consumers versus a general taxpayer or garbage ratepayer structure. What does the PaintCare fee fund? And this is an important question that we get quite a bit. And really, this graphic tells it all. State-specific budget information is always found on our annual reports. And so you can kind of do a deeper dive by accessing the paintcare.org website and digging into those annual reports. But for the most part, 67% of the cost are for paint collection, transportation, and processing. And then we see about 10% for outreach and education. And then that other remaining section is really for staffing, administrative overhead, and other related fees. The collection system, just to kind of give everyone a kind of an overview of the collection system that we manage across all of the PaintCare states. And this is pretty much something that you would see as far as operationally being implemented across each and every PaintCare state. We organize drop-off sites. These drop-off sites are conveniently located and within close proximity to the population. Most of the drop-off sites are paint hardware stores. Others are waste transfer stations, recycling centers, and household hazardous waste facilities. Participation as a drop-off site is voluntary. And the PaintCare sets up these sites, again, within about 15 miles or so of most populations and areas where the PaintCare program is active. Drop-off sites can be used by residences or businesses at no charge. And compared to government HHW programs, the addition of the drop-off sites creates more convenient locations and more normal business hours for residents. Large volume pickup services are also offered in each of the PaintCare states. These important services are a free pickup service basically for those out there that have accumulated a large volume of paint. PaintCare offers this free pickup service of 100 gallons or more, measured by container volume, not by liquid volume. To date, PaintCare has performed approximately 9,469 pickups across all the program states. As you would guess, California leads the charge there with about 4,986 large volume pickups, followed by the states going down to Washington and Vermont that are, down in the hundreds to 1,000 pickups per state. Definitely a service that's welcome and used by many. PaintCare events. I know many of the HHW folks in the audience today rely on HHW events to collect, the materials and waste that they manage. It's no different for us. PaintCare has hosted over 356 drop-off events across the country during the time of the program's implementation. And PaintCare has partnered with HHW programs to host more than 7,700 events with organizations and to host a number of paint-only events where we don't also handle household hazardous waste. So paint disposition, how is the paint managed after it's collected? This is an incredibly important piece and speaks again to that waste management hierarchy that I'm sure many of us are familiar with. So what happens to the leftover paint collected by PaintCare? The disposition really varies by state. And so you can see here that latex paint, it's distributed for reuse through HHW programs and reuse stores and through other initiatives as well, as we're going to be touching on later in the presentation. This is the paint here in a reuse fashion is often sold or given away. It's also latex paint can be blended into a recycled content paint by paint recyclers and sold domestically or exported to folks across the globe. Alternative uses for latex paint include using it as a cement add-in for different concrete-related products or to produce decorative ground covers such as garden stones. As one would expect, we can't always reuse or reduce or recycle the paint, so some of it goes into a waste energy line where we're able to use that product to generate energy in a clean fashion that's also environmentally sound. Landfill as the last option. We do see some latex paint going into the landfills out there, but it's a very, very small amount. Oil-based paint, a small amount is also distributed for reuse or recycled back into paint, but the remainder is used in fuel applications, blended, for instance, into a fuel for cement kilns, which I'm told, and having witnessed some of the kilns across the country, that product actually burns hotter and cleaner than coal, which is interesting. But the graphic says a lot here, and again, a great reminder of what happens to the leftover paint that's collected by PaintCare. One important piece that I thought I'd just bring up as far as the overview is our educational and outreach component. We really dig into this and try to drive this home in all the program states. And again, you can look at the PaintCare website for additional information, but we do stand behind the idea of buy right, use it up, and recycle the rest. That's the core outreach message. You can see here just some of the graphics and different visual pieces that our communications team has generated to help educate the public on how to buy, the right amount of paint for the project, whether that's measuring, the specific square footage of a room, or whether it's storing the paint right so that it can be used for future projects. And then back to reuse, we use the term "give it away" quite often, just so that we can help people understand what we mean by reuse, which is sometimes not clear. But if you can't reuse it or reduce it, you can recycle the rest. So jumping from the overview and kind of digging into the expanded reuse efforts, I thought it would be important just to touch on a few of the drivers, behind the work that we do, and then also to highlight some of the efforts to date. So back to the waste management hierarchy, why should we reuse paint or consider giving it away to those that need it? The waste management hierarchy drives many of our decisions, as it does HHW managers across the country. For those that don't understand it or aren't familiar with what we're talking about here when we're referencing the waste management hierarchy, EPA developed and promoted this for multiple reasons, and it's been around for a good 15, 16, 17 years now. There's no single waste management approach that's suitable for managing all materials. The hierarchy ranks management strategies from the most to least environmentally preferred, and it really places an emphasis on reducing, reusing, recycling, and composting as ways to sustainably manage materials. And back to reuse, we're going to be continuing to try to drive this home, is considered the highest best option. And so for managing materials like paint, and so that's one reason why we're putting efforts behind reuse as we have since the beginning of the program. These strategies in the long run, which is very important in the times that we live in, help to reduce greenhouse gas emissions that contribute to climate change. Just a quick visual here for those that aren't familiar with the waste management hierarchy. You can see here from top to bottom, from most preferred to least preferred. It's a great graphic here that just helps us understand how we should manage materials. And this same waste management hierarchy can be applied to any number of materials and is actively being done so across the country. We'd like to operate in this top area. We'd like to reduce materials if we can. And when we can't reduce those materials, reusing them, recycling them, composting them, or trying to recover those products through energy recovery is a great option prior to thinking about management options that would send it to treatment or disposal. Again, you can find more on this in the on the EPA site underneath their Sustainable Materials Management program. So I encourage everyone to look at that, whether we're talking about paint or other materials. Having a philosophy or having a management plan is a great first step in taking action. And this has been a guiding resource for me as long as I can remember. Historical drivers for expanding reuse within our organization. Our staff met in 2018-19 and went through a fairly significant brainstorming and input feedback type discussion where PaintCare staff were able to come up with a number of different ideas. I think we generated upwards of 20. Out of those 20 ideas, we whittled that list down to a number of different concepts with the idea that we wanted to pursue the top ideas, reserve others for future consideration, or potentially reject those that are unfeasible, cost prohibitive, or just not a great match. We ranked all of these by least or most favored, the amount of staff time that we would project needing, and the potential reuse volume that each one of the ideas would perhaps result in. Here's just a nice list of those brainstorming concepts, and some of these are already in play in a number of different states, and I'm sure a number of folks on the webinar today are implementing reuse at their sites, at their HHW sites, but we did come up with this list of activities that we want to look at and which we have actively been testing over the last couple of years. Specifically there on the very bottom of the list are the paint giveaway events, and this is what we felt was kind of low-hanging fruit, if you will, and really a way for us to take the paint that we've collected through the PaintCare system and make that available to residents and others that have a need for paint. So these testing of concepts and piloting of concepts is kind of in the current status that we're in right now, and our main push there is to grow an understanding of the cost and the volume potential, any limitations or liabilities that may be created by those different concepts. In the long run, our goal is to create a standard operating procedure for each concept where we can track, screen, and provide adequate staffing to ensure that we're doing these operations in a safe way. We also want to dispel any misconceptions or myths that are out there, and there's plenty of those for sure. And we also want to outline next steps for work in other PaintCare states. Along these lines, and we know we can't do this alone, much of the PaintCare work is driven by partnerships and community collaboration. And whether we're working with a service provider like ACT Enviro or Clean Earth, or whether we're working with a paint recycler like Visions or Green Sheen Paint, it really is important to get that partner input. And by testing pilots and testing concepts through pilot events and other pilot efforts, we're able to receive that partner input, staff input, and to put our best foot forward in the future. We also have the opportunity to share this with staff on a regular basis for additional input. And I'll be talking about some of our work here in 2024 that will involve both an internal staff working group that will be looking at reuse initiatives and how we can do that across the different states. But we'll also be looking for staff input as far as ideas that haven't even made it to the table yet. So just to jump back here a couple years into 2022 and to share some of our pilot efforts to date. In 2022, we did implement a number of standalone paint giveaway events in California. And again, with the help of some very important partners on the outside, we were able to work specifically with ACT Enviro And many people would ask why ACT Enviro, and to date, they've been one of our strongest and proven partners with an obvious competent staff that has an understanding of not only how to manage materials and household hazardous waste, but more importantly, paint as well. They do operate a number of permitted fixed facilities in California where standalone events can be implemented. And they've been a willing leader and champion to test these different concepts. And they also have operations in other PaintCare states as well. So once we're able to take a concept, put it on the ground, test it, work out the kinks, our hope is then to duplicate those efforts in other states as well. There's a shot of one of our early ACT Enviro paint giveaway events in California, and we'll have a little bit more of those graphics to share as well. So where would we perhaps want to do these paint giveaway events in California? We did quite a bit of research there, knowing that we had a strong partner, knowing that we had a philosophy and a kind of a driving force behind our operation. We set to ask ourselves where we would like to do these paint giveaway events. Much of that was driven by the ACT's operations. The first community that we looked at was in Merced, California. This is in Northern California. And we looked specifically at May, June, and July of 2022, and these were the months when these events were implemented. Specific to Merced in the general area, we went through and tried to understand the demographics of these locations so that way we can make sure that we were hitting the target. We want to make this paint available to those that don't have paint. And so it's a little bit of a flipping of the script as opposed to providing collection sites for those that have paint to recycle. Specifically in Merced, this is in the Central Valley of California, 130 miles south of Sacramento. It's an ag-based economy and county. The population there supports much of the work being done in the Central Valley. We were able to understand the different demographics from per capita income to the median household income, which just help us understand better the target that we are hoping to hit and to reach. A fairly strong and significant Hispanic and Latino population. And so that was really the driving force behind selecting Merced. And then again, back to ACT and Enviro, they had a fixed facility site there that was able to accommodate the paint giveaway event, and we jumped forward from there. The other site that we looked at in 2022 is in Southern California. Again, another ACT Enviro fixed facility site. Redlands was the community that staff put forward as a great option to focus in on. Again, we went through some of the same procedures, looking at the demographics of that area to make sure that the target that we wanted to hit was in fact located there. The events that we coordinated in Southern California were in August and November of 2022. You can see here that, again, it's slightly different than Redlands. And so it gave us an opportunity to kind of compare and contrast between those two fixed facilities. Redlands uniquely is more of a hub and kind of a busy metro interchange between several communities, whereas again, the Northern California side in Merced was more of an ag-based set of communities, but again, still in kind of an interchange area where several communities could access that event. Here you can see a great graphic just to kind of share with you of the ACT site. You can see too the way that we were able to set up the event. It was really set up as kind of a store floor where you would see different products spread out and made available for residents to view, to shop through, to match with the projects that they have. So we have pallets of 5-gallon buckets, we have tables of 1-gallon cans, and then you can see along the back wall there where we have some quarts and pints. Both latex paint and oil-based paints and stains are given away at these events and made available for reuse, and definitely exciting work for sure. But this kind of answers the question where, we understand who we're working with and where, and it's important to always, to take into account the residents' point of view as well. And so just to share a few of the pilot outcomes and lessons learned, here's a few of the pieces of art and whatnot that folks put together, and a testimony from a resident here. But in the end, the outcomes that we learned from these events, we learned that the benefits do come with some cost to manage these events. It was definitely a feel-good initiative. I think on more than one occasion we saw folks, kind of tearing up and just excited to finally be able to have the access to good usable paint to benefit their homes and community. We did see businesses participate, but it was really a family-centered series of events, and that's continued to be the experience that we've had going forward in 2023 and what we expect in 2024 as well. One big piece, to the work that we've done is coming up with a good procedure for screening good quality paint. It does present a number of challenges because, as you can guess, being HHW managers and folks across the country, you get all kinds of material, right? You get good paint, bad paint, everything else besides potentially paint. And so screening for good paint is incredibly important. And again, while it really shines a light on the fact that you have to have the right partners involved, ACT Enviro took our screening procedures that we felt was the best practice to be shared. They implemented that on site and were able to produce a good quality paint, full cans with labels included, and you could easily see what colors were in the cans by the small mark on the top of the can or other ways. But we did also learn from these events in California that staffing will vary from site to site and, depending on the quantity of paint that you're trying to give away. 2023, just to jump forward into last year, we continued with our pilot events, and I'd like to share additional outcomes here. We jumped out of California, knowing that we had tested the waters there with ACT Enviro, and we're working with them now in 2024, and I'll touch on that shortly. But we did jump out of California in 2023 and specifically worked with a number of different community partners in the Pacific Northwest as a part of this pilot. The event that we coordinated there was in Cornelius, Oregon, and we worked with a number of different individuals to really make this event successful. Clean Earth was the service provider that we tapped and that we worked with to screen the paint that they had collected through large volume pickups, through our retail sites, and to help them produce the good quality paint that would be beneficial to the communities, that would be participating within this Cornelius event. We also engaged a number of other community partners. I can't say enough about that. Putting unity back in community is really important, and people came together, across the Cornelius area, which is just west of Portland, to be a part of this successful venture. These multiple partners included not only Washington County in Oregon, but also a community center, Centro Cultural, which is focused on the Hispanic community there. Phenomenal partners. They allowed us, to have different pluses and benefits as far as outreach, but it also allowed us just to have a lens to look into the community and to match the paint that we had collected and screened and to get it into the hands of those that could put it to good use. We did have a focused outreach effort, as we do with all of the work that we do across the country, have a phenomenal comms team that helps us take the work that we do and put it on the ground in a meaningful way. One thing that was really important about this event in particular was in working with Centro Cultural. Obviously, our target was an Hispanic community that is in the area, and so we did have translation services on site at the event through our partnership with Centro Cultural. We had to adapt this event, having coordinated HHW events across the communities that I've been involved in. It's tough sometimes to find the right event site. And so this was a much smaller community site, but because of the cooperation and the partnership and all those involved, we were able to make do and produce another significant event. Screening, again, can't be stressed more here. We were able to work with Clean Earth, again, to help them understand how to screen and filter in the best paint possible. Again, paint, in full cans, that's intact, that you would want to purchase or take into your house and use, labels intact, and again, a good quality product. And so they were able to come through with us there and produce the paint that we needed for the event. The Cornelius event here, just a couple shots to show you how it was set up. Much like an outdoor, a center for any kind of product, we set it up as kind of an outside store where you had paint that was accessible and easily viewable by the residents. We set it up in a way where there was kind of an entrance and an exit, since everyone that does take paint from these events do have to check out the paint and sign a waiver just noting that they're accepting the paint as is. and that it can be used for for uses that they see appropriate, but that was really on them. The event site here, you can see that it is fairly small as far as the footprint, but again, with the right management and the right partners, you can put together a safe event. And we were able to do this event, with not a lot of other planning besides working with those community partners and really testing it as it goes. The next events that we jumped to in 2023, we went back into California. And instead of working with one of our service providers, like an ACT Enviro or a Clean Earth or a Clean Harbors, we worked instead with a paint recycler, phenomenal partner in California, Envisions Quality Coatings. They have both a North California site, and they also have a newly acquired Southern California site as well. Specific for 2023, we worked in Sacramento and Marysville. Their Sacramento facility is a fixed facility site, and we organized that event on the ground within their facility. And it was another successful venture. In Marysville, we kind of twisted that plan a little bit and worked instead with a Habitat Restore and held the event in their parking lot. Here you can see the Marysville event. Again, this is in a Habitat for Humanity Restore parking lot. Size was not an issue here by any means. We had plenty of space for residents to peruse the paint, to stage the paint as they were taking it away from the event. We do hold residents to a limitation when it comes to the quantity of paint that they can take. 25 gallons or less is really what we focused in on. I think predominantly most of the residents were kind of in that 15 to 20 gallon range, but you can see some of the piles here where folks, have 3 5 gallon buckets and then a number of gallon containers as well. You can also just see here, for some part, you can see the residents range in age from old to families, and definitely a family-centered event, both in California and in that Oregon event that I shared. Just a quick event summary, just to kind of give everybody a breakdown of the specific events that I've just touched on here briefly. Here's the 5 ACT events that we did. We did 3 in Merced, 2 in Redlands, and so we have a pretty good comparison there. You can see too the time of year that we did it, kind of ranged from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. The number of participants again kind of fluctuated, but not much. I think we anticipated maybe more residents, but in the end, when you look at the total reuse gallons that were given away or the total poundage, it is fairly significant. Over the course of these events, from California to Oregon, and then back into California again, working again with service providers and latex paint recyclers, we were able to serve and support 1,180 residents, and we were able to reuse 18,000 gallons of paint. Other innovative efforts and events, we are working in 2024 to take the lead from some of our other staff members who were helpful in helping us connect our paint that we have within the PaintCare network with community projects. This is a great example of that. The Palmdale mural here was produced using leftover paint, and we're looking forward to doing more of this, small scale, larger scale, in a number of communities that we work with in states where PaintCare is active. And this is just one example, again, of what good reusable paint can be used for. Other innovative efforts and events, we are relying increasingly on surveys and input from others, as I noted, just to identify the barriers that are out there for good reusable paint and how to get that paint out into communities. We've gone through a process of trying to figure out the best way to pre-screen paint for community events like the New York City Marathon, a graffiti cover, community improvement and beautification projects, and the list does go on. We are also continuing to work on better tracking of existing and growing reuse efforts. And then we're also now looking in 2024, this is exciting, at internalizing reuse at a service provider fixed facility site. And so I will spill the beans here and say that is at an ACT Enviro site, one of the sites that we used in the pilot in 2022. And so we're looking forward to that. We're labeling it as reuse on Wednesdays. with the idea that they could potentially even give it away during other business hours and other days of the week, but we're focusing in on one day specifically for them to handle that paint and to make that paint available to their customers. One important piece here to note is that with these fixed facility sites, much like an HHW site, not only can you give items away, but then you can help residents, by being able to take those items back. Say they take 10 gallons of paint and some of the paint is not what they want. It's not the right color. It's not the right sheen, whatever that may be. By having those operations, those reuse operations at a fixed facility site that's handling other materials or acting and serving as a collection point for paint, that residents can see that they can bring that paint back, and so that's just a little assurance for them and helps them participate accordingly. So the future, we want to make, just like recycling's been made easy through the PaintCare program and the states that where it's being implemented, we also want to make reuse easy. And I think it's evident that we can do that with with the partners that we have and with the staff that we have. And but it's really going to be to those in the audience and others across the country and PaintCare states to help us make it easy. And I look forward to engaging some of you in that effort. In 2024, as far as next steps, we're going to work to make reuse a priority across all of the states that PaintCare is operating in and where programs are actively being implemented. We feel that we can drive higher reuse rates. I don't think we'll ever quite catch up with the amount of paint we're recycling in any given state. But again, we can reach, for that higher cause and for the highest best use of this material. We do want to create and build a national strategy that both our service providers and our public sector partners can all participate in and be a part of this same strategy. We feel there's a wide range of opportunities exist to reuse pre-screened paint and to take paint from PaintCare operations and apply that in different applications across communities. We do feel a need, obviously, to engage and look for new partners, identify new partners. So a big shout out there to NAMA and to all those that are on the call today. I'd love to hear from you as far as different opportunities in PaintCare states about how we might be able to elevate paint reuse and expand those operations. In our book, all reuse ideas are on the table and have the potential across the states. So I welcome ideas, feedback, and we'll have some time at the end of the call today to dig into that. We are building a paint reuse toolbox, and the idea here is to take the lessons learned from standalone paint giveaway events or mural projects or whatever a community project we might be working on to test paint, to duplicate those efforts and to take those lessons learned and forming a toolbox of sorts that can be implemented across the states that we serve. We have formed an internal national reuse working group, and we're back to that brainstorm list. The phone's open. My email will be shared at the end of this event or at the end of this webinar where folks can reach out to us and help us add ideas to this brainstorm list. We'd love to get paint reuse in all HHW facilities across the country. We've got a good chunk of those already in a number of states we participate in, but there's good reason to believe that there's others out there that are on the cusp and maybe considering reuse. Paint reuse would be something that I would suggest trying first before you delve into other products as far as your HHW line of materials that you're managing. In the long run, we want to determine the volume potential for each idea and to just take the best ideas that we have in front of us and put those on the ground. We are in the process of creating kind of a paint reuse project review process, and that just helps us internally to elevate the best idea that has the greatest potential for volume, that has the greatest potential to reach the populations that we hope to target. And that process has proved interesting for sure, since there is no real roadmap for the level of the paint reuse initiatives that we're looking at across the country. So with that, I think we have a little bit of time left. I don't have the clock right in front of me, but with that, I'd just like to say thank you again to NAMA for allowing PaintCare to deliver this presentation. And a big thank you out there to all the colleagues across the country that spend their days in and out managing household hazardous materials. Can't say enough. I know that work is challenging, and I'm glad PaintCare can be a part of that and be a solution to your programs. And so with that, I'd like to just go ahead and share again my email down there in the right-hand corner and my phone number. Feel free to reach out. And otherwise, we can open it to questions. And I think probably the best way to do that would be through the chat. Brody, correct me if I'm wrong on that. I'm going to back up here once. Okay. Maybe there's not the opportunity for those to voice questions, but I do have the Q&A I can see, so I'll use that. So if you would send your questions into the Q&A, and I'll use that to address any questions. And I'll do my best to get to those here. And if we can't get to all the questions, I can answer those offline as well. So here, Rachel with Missouri Department of Natural Resources, how do you manage paint from businesses? Well, businesses, much like residents, Rachel, are allowed to bring paint into the PaintCare network, and they're able to drop off paint through our retail sites in small quantities, or they can participate in those PaintCare events and the large volume pickups. Having managed the DC program for a year or so, I can say that many businesses do use the large volume pickup service, and that's a great benefit for them. One business in particular that I would just draw attention to would be the Office of the Architect in DC, who cares for many different facilities and buildings within DC, and so periodically we're able to work with them and help service them and collect hundreds of gallons of paint at a time through that large volume pickup service. Here's Mr. Lubinsky in Leon County. And Richard notes here that they found local university art students were a good customer base for color sample and quart-sized latex paint containers. Community theaters were also a good outlet for reuse. And so thank you, Richard, for that. Absolutely. Way back before PaintCare existed, we ran a Paint Smarter program in Lincoln, Lancaster County through their health department there. And we actually worked with local schools, theater groups and whatnot to share the paint that we had collected. We would often do that on a case-by-case basis, or we could do it specifically through what we called usable paint exchanges. And so, yeah, great point, Richard. Mr. Nightingale, I see use of plastic at events. Have there been spills at the events? Well, Dave, that's a great question. And so there's only been one spill that I can account for, and that was the one event where the provider that we worked with determined that they did not want to use plastic because of a tripping hazard. And so I think it's important to protect those sites, especially on a parking lot like the Habitat Restore outside of Portland there in Cornelius. You don't want to damage lots by any means, and you also want to be able to capture any product that would perhaps spill. We don't allow opening of paint at the events, and so the likelihood of spills happening is fairly limited. And so yeah, in the course of those 8 events or 7 events, 8 events in 2022 and 2023, we had one spill of note. Thank you, Mr. Nightingale. And Paul here is asking about my machine says chat disabled. Well, it just worked, Paul. So try using it again and you can ask another question. Okay, any other questions out there? I'll go, oh, I can just scroll down here and get to a few more. Great. Okay, I have a Ron Erickson from Lincoln, Lancaster County, and 2 questions from Ron. Have you ever received pushback from retailers on your free giveaways? Ron, that's a great question. We haven't received, kickback there. We haven't necessarily engaged them to a great degree. We haven't offered promotion and outreach, through those sites. They are aware of the work that we're doing there, but again, the quantity of paint that we're managing is not so great that it has impacted them to date. And I just see one question there, Ron, so feel free to share your other question as well. I don't see it here right away. Ollie, I'll jump to this question. I'd like to see PaintCare's screening protocol. How would I get a copy of that? Well, Ollie, I'd be happy to share that with you. It's fairly simple. We also have some of that information on our website as well, and some of the documents that are there, but it's kind of common sense. You're not going to put a can out on a shelf for reuse that's leaking, that's without a label, that's a quarter full. basically you want to produce paint and screen paint that is good, usable paint, and that you can, pretty much rest assured that it's going to be something that a resident's going to want. Obviously, we have to take into account freezing and thawing and some of those other limitations when it comes to reuse. And the best way to do that, again, is just to create a best practice or a protocol that helps your partners screen the best paint. All the while that I say that, I'll just note that every time we talk about screening, we do that in the same breath as talking about the fact that we are collecting paint on a regular basis, again, within 15 miles of most residents. And so if somebody were to take a can of paint that's not the right color, or maybe the consistency or the quality of the paint is somewhat questionable, they can bring that back into the system for free. Good question. Ken Miller, the president of NAMA here. Dan, if a member's local, state, professional organizations have identified paint stewardship or EPR as a legislative priority, what support does PaintCare provide to that process? Well, Ken, that's a great question. And we, as you know, we do have a government affairs staff, Heidi McAuliffe and others that are working diligently on programs in states across the country, or states that want programs across the country. And much like with Illinois, Missouri, or others there in the Midwest stand to benefit from PaintCare. And so engaging Heidi and her team is a great way to do that. And we do provide support for that process. And so I would encourage you to reach out to me or other PaintCare leaders. We'd be happy to talk to you about that. I do know, Ken, you're in Iowa. And so, I always thought Iowa would be a state that would potentially come online here with PaintCare. And I would see that happening in the future, but you do need to have that political will. You do need to have that understanding on the ground of what it means to be a PaintCare state. And PaintCare is here to answer those questions and provide support. Thank you, Ken. Chris, is the paint that is discarded in landfills processed in any further way, or is it discarded in the buckets and cans straight to the landfill? That's pretty much the way it happens for the most part. We are working with a number of partners to look at cans. We do manage cans and track that data as far as cans that are recycled or cans that are landfilled. And again, we're always trying to follow that highest best use and that waste management hierarchy. And so we try to limit the amount of cans that are going into the landfill, but there's not much work being done as far as different processing methods and to extract paint out of the cans. But we are seeing some movement and some interest on part of our partners looking at cans and containers and how we can better manage those in a more sustainable fashion. Ollie, San Joaquin County HHW, is that I take it that's maybe you're calling them out as a reuse site, and I know that they are, and we appreciate their work and efforts there. And they're one of many of our California HHW partners, and that participate in reuse. Ron, your second question: would you ever use a geographic region smaller than an entire state? For instance, Lincoln and Omaha in Nebraska have populations that are over 1 million people. Ron, that hasn't been the case. As far as I understand, all of the states that are participating right now are, the legislation covers the entire state. And I do think, though, that Nebraska is prime based on the unicameral there, and just the fact that you have such great distance between Lincoln and Omaha to manage products, whether it's HHW or paint. But that's a great question and something to consider. I will run that by our government affairs team. Paul is back in line here. Why is non-architectural paint not a part of the program? We get lots of auto paint. Also, why is aerosol paint not covered? Great questions, Paul. And this is really driven by the manufacturers, remembering that those initial slides with the American Coatings Association, again, they represent 95% of the paint manufacturers. And so architectural coatings was a general product sector and product line that we could focus in on. And these are the type of coatings that you would see normally, within homes and communities. And so we've stayed away from the other paints just because there's a number of issues when it comes to management and processing of those paints. Why is aerosol paint not being covered? Well, just wait, Paul. I think that's in the chute, and it's coming our way. California just recently took that step to manage aerosols, and we're watching and working with them to understand how that works. Aerosol paint cans can be tricky. There's a lot of different products that are within that are that use aerosol as a method of delivery. And so there are concerns there, health and safety concerns, and but it is coming. And I think as you look at states and as they change their policies, paint being covered underneath the universal waste rule in New York, um, basically, we're going to follow, the path of policy. And if a state policy changes and says that we need to accept aerosol paint, we'll be looking at that specifically on how to implement that. But I wouldn't be surprised that in 10 years, not only will we double in the number of states that are within the PaintCare community, but I would guess that we'll be managing aerosols to some degree as well. Good questions, Paul. We have a Jason here. Jason, I believe, again, from Lincoln, Lancaster County in Nebraska. Who determines paint can be reused, and how is that determination made? What do you look for to determine paint is still good? Great questions, Jason. And really, it's up to us as material managers to identify good reusable product. And when it comes down to paint, it's back to that screening criteria. I mean, you can, as a homeowner or as a resident, you can pick up a can of paint and understand the usefulness of that product, right? And so it's costly, to purchase brand new paint, and we see a large quantity of good paint come in that's still good and usable. And so, keeping with the idea of a circular economy, we want to take that paint and put it to its highest best use. And so that's first and foremost the driving factor. And then we use that screening criteria as kind of a best practice to help pick out the best paint. And you can imagine, having managed household hazardous waste, that again, you get paint in all shapes and sizes and quality as far as the condition of the can and whatnot. And so never will we give away or work with reuse paint that's leaking or that we would doubt for some reason because it doesn't have a proper label on it. And so we really rely on those pieces to identify the paint as good. Ken here is just saying, thanks, Dan. I wanted to make sure everyone understood the process. Yeah, thank you, Ken. Yeah, let me see here. Paul's back in line again. What about my second question about non-architectural paints and aerosols? Well, I think I answered that, Paul, for the most part, but if you'd like to go ahead and email me, I'd love to have an additional discussion with you about that. And we can kind of dig into paint care products and paint care products, which again, I would invite everyone to view the PaintCare site, where we dig deep into the weeds when it comes to the products that we cover, the fee structure, the annual reports that we have, which is just there's a huge wealth of knowledge and understanding and lessons learned within those reports. So again, if your question is not fully answered here, I would invite you to reach out directly to me or to look at the website for additional information. Ollie, maybe I will share mine with you. It's more specific to the signs of separation, which is the main obstacle when determining reuse availability. Yes, please do. I'd love to look into that, Ollie, and to understand better what you're referencing. Joe here from Northeastern Illinois. Joe, welcome, and look forward to working in Illinois. So it's great to see a question come out of the state. How much storage space is used for your paint reuse events? Is paint given away at collection sites, or is there a transporter involved? Well, transporters or our service providers are almost always involved. And, for the most part, the reuse events, if you think of an HHW event, you need that type of parking lot. You need a parking lot that allows not only for the movement of vehicles, but the movement of people as well. And as we all can probably guess or understand, sometimes people and vehicles don't mix. And so having a little larger area for the paint, shop area where the paint's actually given away, where folks are checking out the paint, asking questions about the paint, you need that area. But then you also need an area for parking or for a drive-through where folks can come through and receive the paint that they've picked up. Great questions, Joe, and I'd be happy to dig into that a little bit further. As far as collection sites, we don't see our retail sites giving away paint, but our HHW partners out there, they do have the option and the ability to receive paint and to give away paint. And then back to the internalized operation that I spoke of as far as a 2024 opportunity, we are looking at working with transporters or service providers and providing reusable paint at their locations. Great questions, Joe. Feel free to reach out via email with additional questions. Thanks. Dave Nightingale here. Last question on the list, and it looks like we're about at 11:56, and so we're getting pretty close. Architectural paints include almost all ACA members. Aerosols and non-architectural paints are a similar number of ACA members, so not as broad applicability within the paint industry. There you go. That's a great point, Dave. Thank you so much. Dave Nightingale with Special Waste Associates, NAMA board member, a good friend and colleague as well. Thank you, Dave, for making that point and sharing that with everyone. So with that, it's at 11:56. I can give everybody 4 minutes back into their day. Again, I would just stress, give me a call or shoot me an email with your questions. And if I can't answer those questions specifically, I'll share it with our leadership team or with our state managers, and we'll get back to you ASAP. So from the PaintCare family, thank you so much for participating in today's webinar. And thank you for helping us make paint recycling easy and reuse as well. Thank you so much.